this event tonight here at the church, and hoping that somebody's lives has changed and souls are delivered. That's my main focus right now. Not show, but ministry. So
For years, both Leandrea Johnson and Pastor Gino Jennings have commanded attention in the faith community for very different reasons. One is known for her transparency and powerful testimony, while the other has built a reputation through uncompromising preaching. But when old tensions, public reactions, and unexpected allegations began colliding, a controversy emerged that few saw coming. So what really happened? And why are people suddenly talking about Gino Jennings and his wife in the same conversation as Leandrea Johnson? How a silent conflict began behind the scenes. Long before live streams, viral clips, and heated debates across social media, there was an underlying tension that many people noticed, but few could fully explain. It wasn't the kind of conflict that played out through direct arguments or public accusations. Instead, it developed quietly, hidden beneath sermons, interviews, testimonies, and the growing conversations surrounding two very different figures in the faith community. On one side was Leandrea Johnson, a Grammy-winning gospel singer whose journey has always been marked by honesty. Unlike many public figures who carefully protect their image, Leandrea often chose transparency. She openly discussed personal struggles, hardships, and the challenges of balancing faith while navigating real-life battles. For many supporters, that authenticity made her relatable. She represented the idea that imperfect people could still be used for a greater purpose. On the other side stood Pastor Gino Jennings, a preacher known for his firm stance on biblical doctrine and holiness. Over the years, Jennings built a massive following through sermons that challenged cultural trends, modern church practices, and what he viewed as compromises within Christianity. His supporters admired his willingness to say what others would not. To them, he represented conviction and unwavering commitment to Scripture. At first glance, their paths seemed completely unrelated. They operated in different spaces, spoke to different audiences, and rarely appeared in the same conversations. Yet somehow, their names kept surfacing together. Not because either of them publicly targeted the other, but because their messages often touched on similar issues from very different perspectives. As Pastor Jennings continued delivering sermons about discipline, accountability, and what he considered proper conduct within ministry, some listeners began drawing their own conclusions about who those messages could apply to. At the same time, Leandrea frequently spoke about grace, restoration, and the pain many people experience when they feel rejected by church communities while trying to rebuild their lives. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Before long, online audiences started connecting dots that neither side had officially connected themselves. Every sermon clip, every interview, and every social media post became material for speculation. Supporters on both sides analyzed statements, searched for hidden meanings, and debated whether an unspoken disagreement was quietly taking shape. What made the situation even more intriguing was that neither Leandrea nor Jennings directly addressed the growing rumors. The silence only fueled curiosity. In many cases, silence creates more questions than answers, and that's exactly what happened here. Behind the scenes, discussions reportedly continued within gospel circles. Stories, claims, and whispers began circulating among people connected to ministry networks and church communities. Most remained unverified, but they added to the growing belief that this situation involved more than simple theological differences. Then something happened that pushed the conversation into a completely new territory. What had once been speculation surrounding sermons and public messages suddenly became linked to a specific message that many believe sparked the first real crack in the story. And once that sermon began making waves online, people started paying attention in a way they never had before. The first public sign of trouble. The situation remained largely fueled by speculation until a particular sermon began attracting widespread attention online. While Pastor Gino Jennings had delivered countless messages throughout the years, this one seemed to strike a different nerve. Within days, clips from the sermon were spreading across social media platforms, drawing praise from supporters and criticism from others, who felt the message carried a deeper implication. As usual, Jennings spoke with the direct style that had made him one of the most recognizable voices in modern ministry. He addressed subjects that he frequently emphasized: holiness, accountability, spiritual discipline, and the dangers of allowing culture to influence biblical teachings. For his followers, these were familiar themes. They viewed his approach as a necessary correction in a world where many churches, in their opinion, had become more focused on popularity than doctrine. However, one portion of the sermon quickly became the center of attention. During the message, Jennings criticized what he described as emotional displays that, in his view, could sometimes overshadow genuine spiritual transformation. He questioned whether certain forms of modern worship placed too much emphasis on performance and not enough on repentance and obedience. He also revisited his long-standing views regarding leadership roles within the church and the importance of maintaining what he believes to be biblical order. What made the sermon controversial wasn't necessarily what was said. It was how people interpreted it afterward. Although Jennings never mentioned Leandrea Johnson by name, many viewers immediately began connecting the discussion to her. Some pointed to her emotional singing style, her public testimony, and her openness about personal struggles. Others believed the comparison was unfair and argued that people were creating a narrative that didn't actually exist. Yet once social media became involved, the conversation took on a life of its own. Video creators began posting side-by-side clips. One video would feature Jennings discussing spiritual discipline, followed by footage of Leandrea speaking about grace, healing, and the challenges of overcoming personal battles. The contrast between their perspectives fascinated viewers. Comment sections exploded with debates about faith, accountability, forgiveness, and whether churches should prioritize correction or compassion. Many observers noted that both figures were addressing real issues, but from entirely different angles. Leandrea's message often centered on restoration. She frequently spoke about people carrying wounds, mistakes, and burdens while still seeking a relationship with God. Her supporters appreciated her willingness to acknowledge that faith journeys are rarely perfect. Jennings, meanwhile, consistently emphasized standards, responsibility, and adherence to Scripture. His supporters believed those principles were being neglected in many religious spaces and saw his preaching as a necessary reminder of biblical expectations. The growing contrast between those viewpoints became the fuel that kept the discussion alive. What's fascinating is that neither side initially appeared interested in creating a public feud. There were no direct responses, no interviews targeting each other, and no official statements confirming any disagreement. Yet the audience continued building the story themselves. Every new sermon, every social media post, and every public appearance was examined for hidden meaning. Some viewers became convinced there was an ongoing conflict beneath the surface. Others dismissed the entire situation as internet speculation. But behind the public debates, rumors began circulating that suggested something more personal might be happening. People tied to various church and gospel circles began sharing accounts of possible interactions, mutual awareness, and conversations said to have happened away from public view. Most remained unverified, yet they deepened the intrigue around an already growing controversy. Then an unexpected turn emerged. Discussions gaining traction online suggested someone within Pastor Jennings's wider circle allegedly reached out in a way that shifted the narrative. The focus moved beyond sermons and theology into something more personal, raising questions about private communications and behind-the-scenes interactions. And Leandrea Johnson finally responded publicly. When Leandrea finally spoke out, up until this point, everything surrounding the controversy had been built on interpretation, speculation, and carefully edited clips circulating online. But that changed the moment Leandrea Johnson decided to go live. It wasn't a planned appearance with lighting, production, or a polished message. There were no announcements, no build-up, and no media team guiding the moment. It was raw, unfiltered, and immediate. Just a simple live stream that would soon draw thousands of viewers within minutes of going online. From the beginning, it was clear this was not going to be a casual conversation. Leandrea appeared visibly emotional, carrying the weight of frustration that seemed to have been building for some time. Instead of performing or singing, she spoke directly to the audience, addressing what she described as the pressure placed on gospel artists to appear spiritually perfect, while silently dealing with real human struggles behind the scenes. She explained that many artists are celebrated publicly but judged privately, praised for their voices but questioned for their imperfections. Her tone wasn't aggressive, but it carried a deep sense of exhaustion, as if she had reached a point where silence was no longer an option. As the live stream continued, she shifted into personal reflections about experiences in religious environments, describing feeling misunderstood in spaces meant to represent grace, where vulnerability was often met with judgment. Viewers realized the discussion was becoming more specific and intentional. She then referenced leadership styles in the church that prioritize correction over compassion, prompting speculation in the comments. Without initially naming anyone, she built tension until finally mentioning Pastor Gino Jennings, instantly shifting the atmosphere into public controversy, unfolding live. She went on to describe situations connected to church environments associated with Jennings' ministry circle, claiming she felt restricted and evaluated in ways that questioned her place rather than her purpose. One of the most discussed claims from the live stream involved being allowed into a church setting, but being told she could not actively participate in ministry roles. For her, that moment symbolized a deeper emotional conflict: acceptance in presence, but rejection in participation. As she continued speaking, her emotions intensified. She reflected on the broader experience of being openly imperfect in a system that often expects perfection before grace. She admitted her faults, but questioned why transparency sometimes leads to exclusion instead of restoration. Her words immediately divided the internet. Supporters praised her for speaking openly about what they believed many people experience but rarely express in religious spaces. Critics, however, argued that publicly naming a pastor crossed a line and escalated an already sensitive situation unnecessarily. Regardless of opinion, one thing was clear: the situation had officially moved beyond speculation. Clips from the live stream spread rapidly across social media platforms. Edited highlights circulated within hours, each one sparking new debates and interpretations. Influencers, commentators, and viewers all weighed in, turning a single live stream into a full-scale online controversy. But what most people didn't realize was that this live stream was only the beginning. Because as the reactions grew louder and the discussions became more intense, new materials began surfacing in the background. Screenshots, alleged messages, and unnamed accounts started appearing online, each one adding another layer to the unfolding story. And among all these emerging pieces of information, one question started dominating the conversation. Was this really just about a live stream, or was it about to become something far bigger, driven by evidence that no one expected to see? When screenshots entered the conversation. After the live stream spread across social media, the conversation didn't slow down. In fact, it escalated in a way that nobody involved seemed able to control. What started as a personal testimony quickly transformed into something much larger, as viewers began searching for anything that could either support or challenge what had been said. That's when the so-called receipts started appearing. At first, it was just screenshots shared across different platforms. One of the most widely circulated images appeared to show an email or internal message connected to a church network associated with Pastor Gino Jennings. According to the content being shared online, Leandrea Johnson was reportedly welcomed to attend a service, but with strict conditions attached to her participation. She could be present, but she would not be allowed to minister, perform, or take part in any official role within the service. The wording in the message, as described by those circulating it, was calm and professional on the surface, but the interpretation behind it quickly became the real point of debate. To some viewers, it looked like standard church structure and order. To others, it felt like exclusion disguised as protocol, and that disagreement alone was enough to split the internet into opposing sides. Supporters of Jennings argued that churches have the right to set boundaries, especially when it comes to doctrine, leadership, and public ministry involvement. They insisted that structure is not rejection, but discipline and alignment with spiritual standards. On the other side, supporters of Leandrea saw something entirely different. To them, the message represented a familiar pattern of being accepted in presence, but restricted in purpose. They argued that her voice was being acknowledged, but her expression was being controlled. The debate intensified even further when Leandrea herself allegedly reacted to the circulating screenshot. While she didn't launch a direct counterstatement, her response, as described online, suggested disappointment over being valued only under certain conditions. According to interpretations of her reaction, she felt that her presence was welcomed when convenient, but her testimony was questioned when it became uncomfortable. Just when the situation seemed like it had reached its peak, another piece of content surfaced. This time, it wasn't a screenshot. It was an audio recording. A voice clip began spreading across social media platforms, allegedly tied to someone within or connected to Jennings's wider ministry circle. Although its authenticity was never officially confirmed, that did not stop it from becoming one of the most discussed elements in the entire controversy. In the recording, the speaker questioned whether Leandrea's emotional openness and transparency made her difficult to place in structured ministry settings, with a tone focused on perception, stability, and audience response. What made the clip impactful was not only the statements, but the implications behind them, sparking a wider discussion on how emotional honesty is viewed in religious spaces. As it spread, reactions intensified, shifting into debates on church culture, leadership boundaries, and transparency. New claims also surfaced online, while others cautioned against treating anonymous posts and unverified audio as factual evidence. Despite the divide, one thing was clear. The narrative had expanded far beyond a single live stream or a single message. It was no longer just about Leandrea Johnson and Pastor Gino Jennings in isolation. It had become a wider discussion about voice, authority, and control within modern faith communities. And just as the conversation started reaching another level, a new development emerged from an unexpected source, someone who claimed to have seen how things operated from the inside, a former insider. And what they were about to reveal next would push the entire situation into even deeper territory, where perception, structure, and hidden internal dynamics all collided at once. The insider revelation that took everything further. Just when the situation seemed to have peaked online, a new development shifted the conversation again. This time, it wasn't a sermon clip, live stream, or anonymous screenshot, but an alleged insider account from someone claiming ties to the ministry environment connected to Pastor Gino Jennings. The audio circulated quietly at first, then quickly spread across platforms. Within hours, it was reposted and analyzed as viewers questioned its validity and context. The speaker identified himself as a former associate, describing a highly structured environment focused on discipline, order, and strict doctrinal alignment. According to the voice in the recording, decisions within the ministry setting were not always based solely on talent or visibility. Instead, he suggested that perception, reputation, and alignment with internal expectations played a significant role in determining who was welcomed into certain spaces and who was not. One of the most discussed parts of the recording was the mention of individuals like Leandrea Johnson. The speaker did not present direct accusations, but the way he described caution and sensitivity around certain public figures sparked immediate reactions online. To some listeners, it sounded like confirmation of what Leandrea had been expressing in her live stream. To others, it raised concerns about whether the recording was being interpreted fairly or taken out of context for viral attention. As the audio continued, the tone shifted from description to reflection. The speaker implied that within structured environments like this, there were often unspoken tensions between maintaining doctrinal order and extending compassion to individuals who were still publicly navigating personal struggles. He suggested that while discussions behind closed doors did exist, not everyone felt safe enough to voice disagreement openly. That silence, according to him, created a gap between internal conversations and public perception, one that outsiders rarely see but insiders quietly experience. Then came the line that quickly became the focal point of online discussions. "You are not always rejected because you lack purpose," he implied. "Sometimes you are rejected because you don't fit the structure that already exists." That statement alone spread across social media, quoted, reposted, and debated from every angle. Some saw it as a powerful reflection on institutional systems. Others dismissed it as an emotional interpretation of a complex organizational structure. Shortly after the recording gained traction, reactions from Leandrea's supporters surfaced once again. Many interpreted the message as indirect validation of her earlier concerns about feeling restricted or misjudged within certain religious spaces. At the same time, supporters of Pastor Jennings cautioned against relying on anonymous audio clips as factual evidence, urging viewers to separate speculation from verified truth. But regardless of which side people took, the conversation had clearly evolved beyond individual experiences. It was no longer just about a sermon, a live stream, or a single alleged message. It had become a wider debate about authority, emotional expression, and how modern faith communities navigate differences in personality, calling, and interpretation. And as more voices began to emerge online, sharing similar experiences and opinions, one question started to dominate the entire discussion. How many more untold stories were still hidden behind closed doors, waiting for the moment they finally come into the light? Because if this recording was only the beginning of what insiders were willing to say, then what comes next could reshape the entire narrative all over again. And this time, there may be no way to contain it. Thanks for staying until the end. If you found this video interesting, hit like, subscribe, and keep watching for more similar stories. Comment your thoughts and tell us what you think really happened.